Our gospel reading will be chapter 20 of Matthew, verses 1 to 16, and after reading it, we will be singing together the response, which is one of the verses of Amazing Grace. I invite you to stand. Jesus has been telling parables to the disciples about what the realm of God or the realm of heaven looks like. And so Jesus says, "For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire laborers for his vineyard. After agreeing with the laborers for the usual daily wage, he sent them to his vineyard. When he went out about 9 o'clock, he saw others standing idle in the marketplace. And he said to them, 'You also go into the vineyard, and I will pay you whatever's right.' So they went, and when he went out again about noon and about 3 o'clock, he did the same. And about 5 o'clock, he went out and found others standing around. And he said to them, 'Why are you standing idle here all day?' They said to him, 'Because no one has hired us.' He said to them, 'You also go into the vineyard.' When evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to his manager, 'Call the laborers and give them their pay, beginning with the last, then going to the first.' When those hired about 5 o'clock came, each of them received the usual daily wage. Now when the first came, they thought that they would receive more, but each of them also received the usual daily wage. And when they received it, they grumbled against the landowner, saying, 'These last worked only 1 hour, and you have made them equal to us, who have borne the burden of the day and the scorching heat?' But the owner replied to one of them, 'Friend, I am doing you no wrong. Did you not agree with me for the usual daily wage? Take what belongs to you and go. I choose to give to this last the same as I give to you. Am I not allowed to do what I choose with what belongs to me? Or are you envious because I'm so generous?' So the last will be first, and the first will be last." This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. My friend René is a day laborer. I met him at a bilingual church that we helped start in Indianapolis when I was there in the presbytery. He's a very talented musician. He plays the guitar wonderfully. He knows a lot of praise songs for church in Spanish. So he was a part of the worship team which led weekly worship services at that small church we were starting. René is undocumented. René is from Guatemala, and he usually works as a painter. It's complicated why people come to the U.S. It's even more complicated to think about why people risk coming to the States without a visa, which is really hard to get. But let me rephrase that. It's simple why we come to study and work, or to improve our life, and the life of our family. What's complicated is the risk assessment, especially by those who end up coming without documents or those who are coming legally to seek asylum. They face incredible pressure back home, usually pressure that is financial, a collapsing economy around them that gives them no chance to earn a living. Or maybe even in terms of security, where they face threats of violence by gangs or even corrupt governments and soldiers and police. And so the calculus is, do I stay in my home country and face those risks and possibly die? Or do I make the dangerous journey and face those risks for the sake of having a chance to survive? And usually they already know someone here in the States, as usually a friend or a relative. And they say to them, oh yeah, come, you can stay with us. And I'm sure my boss can use more help. As a painter, René has steady work because people who have hired him before know that he does good work. In fact, he and his friends will sometimes get hired and go into Ohio or Illinois to a hotel that is being built or to a new housing complex, and they'll get busy painting interior and exterior walls. Day laborers who don't usually have steady opportunities like my friend, they have to get a gig by going sometimes outside of a hardware store like a Home Depot or a Lowe's, and they hang around at the edge of the parking lot waiting for contractors to drive by, offer them work for the day, and then offer them a ride back to the place of pickup. The contractors turn a blind eye to the lack of documents, or they pretend that the fake documents look real enough, because these are hard workers, because they usually can pay them less than the going rate, and they know that they need the work. It's a tenuous existence for these workers. They are in a very vulnerable position. And this is when the technology fails me. I think it's going to be worth the wait if you give me a minute. It's a tenuous existence for the workers, and they are in a vulnerable position. If they're still waiting at noon at Lowe's, that means that there may be no work for them. And for them, no work means no money. Maybe the people hired earlier in the day had been stronger, or maybe they had been better at English. If they do work, there is cash at the end of the day, and they'll get that ride back to the Lowe's. But it's still a tenuous existence. My friend René tells me that there have been weeks when a boss makes excuses and promises about paying them later and ends up then not paying them for the week at all. And who are they going to complain to, after all? Are they going to go to some police officer and say, hey, officer, I'm in this country illegally, but that guy over there really owes me about 60 hours worth of work? René and his friends depend on having a contractor who will be honest and fair, who will see them as people and who will honor their work. The workers in the parable that Jesus was sharing depended on the landowner to be fair and honorable. But from the very start, that story is very strange because it sounds unusual for the way in which things worked at the time. For one, no landowner would ever go to the square to look for day laborers. They would come to the vineyard, especially those who were known to the landowner. They would get first bid or first chance of getting a position. And then the landowner, if they needed to round out the workforce that day, would send somebody else out to the marketplace to bring in more people. Then in this parable, the landowner keeps hiring people that no one else would have hired, who were there in the marketplace past the time when people would get brought in. Think about it as people who would not have been as good at their job as the ones who had been picked earlier. To be hired meant to eat. So if somebody was going to ask them to come at noon or at 5 in the afternoon, they would have said, of course, we will go. They were at the mercy of the landowner for a paycheck, even for a partial day. But the landlord, whom they hoped would be fair, wasn't fair. In fact, he was downright generous. This is where human notions of individualism clash with divine notions of care of the community. Those hired earlier weren't just trying to make a living, they were hoping to become favored employees. They were hoping that they would get noticed so that they would be first in line the next day. And so there was plenty of work, and the slower workers were just going to get in the way. And so the people who were there the whole day say, I don't mind if those other people are here, but I don't want them to mess my stuff up. I don't want them to get in my way. But caring for the last didn't come at the expense of the first, no matter how much the first complained about it. They wanted a bonus because they thought the last people got the full day pay, and so they thought, I deserve more than what we had agreed on. Something that we reflect upon this Lent is that God grades on a curve. And that curve is called grace. It's God's amazing grace. God breaks the norms of fairness because God's grace isn't something that we earn. It's not like the more we pray, the more God will like us. Think about the forgiveness a parent offers a child after they have drawn with markers on the wall. Is that more or less forgiveness that when the parent realizes that one child hit the other? There is no earning of a paycheck of grace from God. There is no bigger or smaller paycheck coming depending on how good or bad we've been, or how long or how recently we have been believers. God is not fair. And honestly, that's awesome. It's awesome because it frees us up. This isn't a competition to earn more of God's grace as though we'd get a nicer condo in heaven if we did. It's awesome because it frees us up to care about the community around us. Because we are freed up to care about the well-being of all people, knowing it won't alter our standing with God. It's awesome because it frees us up from being jealous or from pretending that we get to decide how God ought to run this divine business. It's awesome because for all you and I know, we are the workers that got picked up at 5 p.m. Have you ever thought of that? We work in the vineyard side by side, thankful for God's surprising and amazing grace. Thanks be to God.